put them. When I screen share, maybe you guys can help me figure that out. Like, let me know if faces are blocking the slides, because I think in the recording it will be as well. So again, we've taken a few months off. I've done some workshops on different ed tech type tools and things. And so we're diving back into really like a focus on some universal design for learning this week. And I really wanted to, we did this general overview. For some of you came to some of them, or maybe all of them. We did kind of a general overview of each column of the UDL guidelines for kind of a series of 3 workshops where we talked about each one. So now I kind of wanted to switch gears and be like, so now what, right? Like, you've thought about how there are these guidelines around multiple means of expression and representation and action and expression. But then what does that mean, right? Like, how do you start to make some of those shifts? And so that really is kind of what today is all about. Again, as always, please stop, interrupt, ask questions, share ideas. And I'm sure, we're doing some of this stuff already. So it's really great to share how you see it playing out in your own classroom, and giving each other ideas. So I'll just dive in for now and go ahead. So right now are any faces blocking any of the slides? No? Okay, so I'm gonna assume maybe it's not on my recording. And if it is, for people that are watching the recording later, I'm talking to you. I apologize if my Zoom and my slides are overlapping. So 2 really big kind of tenets of universal design are these 2 ideas of identifying barriers for our students and setting clear goals. And so we're going to look at those 2 kind of elements today. And then, like I said, really kind of think about how these might apply in our own classrooms. So the first thing I wanted to do was just for you to kind of think about a focus student in your class. So, when you're thinking about students who are like kind of hitting some barriers, right? Like maybe struggling in a certain way with some things in your class. This could be, social emotional. It could be, sitting through a lesson and really paying attention and focusing. It could be physical writing. It could be really anything that might be applying to this student. I just want you, as we're talking, to kind of maybe keep this student in mind, because I think it's really helpful to think about this in a practical and realistic way for us and how it applies to us. So I'm just going to give you about 30 seconds to kind of think who that student is, or maybe 1 or 2 students who, if you're like me, it's kind of, a student pops into your head kind of right away, right? Like thumbs up if you already kind of have somebody in mind that you're thinking about. Yeah. Okay. So you have this focus student in mind in your class. And the first thing I want you to do is think about some characteristics that make that student unique. These can be things that we might think about in an educational setting as more challenging, some things about the student that make the kind of traditional or typical lesson that we might teach more challenging. They could also be characteristics that are things that would make that student like excel in a certain way, right? Like, so something that sets a few things maybe that set that student apart, some characteristics that make that student unique. And after you've probably already, have some thoughts swimming around in your head, some descriptors of this student. Now I want you to think about an activity, an assignment, a lesson, a time of your day, a transition, some part of your day that's been challenging for this student, something in particular that, maybe it was a certain lesson. Maybe it's every day at a certain time, this student butts up against some sort of challenge. Because this is really going to be kind of the at the heart of what we talk about today. Does anyone want to share really quickly who, like, not obviously not the name of your student and like their address, but like some characteristics of this student and then what the challenge is without, giving away any personal information? Yeah, Lisa?
So I have a boy in my class. He's very capable, but at times he doesn't want to participate. So if it's kind of like that's not what he wants to do, he doesn't want to do it. He takes a lot of coaxing. Like, do you think you can do it? Can you do this? And so it's just the potential is there. It's just the motivation is not always there. And so he tends to sort of pout, like, I don't want to do it, or he gets mad.
Yeah. Yeah. So the descriptors are more like capable, bright, has the skills maybe, but that motivation piece is the challenge. Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else have someone in mind that you are thinking about?
Lisa's student sounds very much like mine. It's the motivation piece.
Motivation.
Yeah. Kind of checks. I know some of the tasks are a little bit difficult, but rather than just, I'm going to try, it's, can I go to the bathroom, or can I, avoidance.
Yeah. Yeah. Shutting down and avoidance. Totally. Yeah. All right. So, in what you're describing is that there's in your lessons, in your structures, in your classrooms, these learning experiences there are some barriers for these students, right? There are some barriers that are preventing them from engaging or staying motivated, having the willingness to try and to persevere with the work. So the very, initial tenet with UDL is that that learners in our classrooms are unique, right? There's a wide variety of students that are coming to us with a wide variety of needs, both strengths and challenges, right? That make them who they are as students, as learners. And that there is no one size fits all. There is no average. There is no way that we can teach that's going to reach every single one of them. And so if we understand that students are coming in with these unique differences, and we can design our learning experiences to kind of meet them where they are, then we're providing options for them to be more successful with it. So what could we be putting in place that we're not thinking of that might make the content more accessible, the learning experience more manageable, whatever it is, right? That the barrier is. So the first thing that UDL talks about is this idea of variability. And you thought about the uniqueness of your learners. And these are the things that are internal, right? That your student is coming to you with. These are characteristics unique to that student. I mean, they probably share these characteristics with other students as well, but it's almost like their identity profile, right? As a student and that combination to them is going to be very unique. This could be things like an English language learner. It could be what their reading level is. It could be something really that we would imagine to be a real positive or a real strength, like excelling in music, right? Could be unique about a certain student in your class. Having limited background knowledge about the content that you're covering, right? Then these are all things that are internal, right? The student is coming to you with those characteristics. So the second thing that UDL is going to talk about in terms of your students is what barriers are in place then. And these are the external things. These would be anything in the environment or in your lesson design or your learning space that would hinder learning for these students, right? For any student. And these are going to be different for everybody as well, right? The fact that text is very, very small on a page might not be a problem for me if I have my glasses on or if I have perfect vision, but that might be a barrier for someone else whose characteristic variability internal is vision, right? And so this is going to be different for everybody as well. And it's so hard as a teacher to make things work for every single student, right? It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of knowledge. It takes a lot of trial and error. But what I think with UDL can see is that the more and more we can start to incorporate some different tools and strategies from the very beginning, We don't need to wait for a student to fail at something before, in order to then meet that need, right? So if we know that Snap and Read is a tool, then, oops, someone else is here. So we can, so we can then start to incorporate these things from the very beginning. And I think, Amanda, you're here. Hi. So these kinds of things would be things like the text that you're providing is above or below one specific student's reading level, right? It could be that a task requires a physical challenge, and that physical challenge is difficult for a particular student to do. It could be that an activity relies on audio and listening is really hard for a particular student. It could be that, like the example I already gave, that text is too small. So again, we've got two different things. We've got the internal part, that's your students, and we've got these external things that are creating barriers for them. So that's really important to kind of think about as you then go into this second belief, which is that it's really important that all of your lessons, all of your, even the way you set up your physical space in your classroom, the way you're presenting information, that you have that you know what your goal is, right? You know what your goal is for your student. We need to be really clear on what we want our students to get out of any particular lesson or unit or experience. And that one thing that UDL really focuses on is removing the means from the goal. So my favorite example of this is thinking about something that we've probably all done, where let's say you're teaching I'm not sure what even age this would be, but if you're teaching the life cycle of a butterfly, right? And that's, you really want, it's in your science standards, in your science curriculum, to teach your students about the life cycle of a butterfly. The goal of that lesson or that unit is for the students to know the life cycle of a butterfly. What I think we tend to do is then attach a project to that goal. And we say, okay, we're all going to draw a beautiful poster to show the steps of the life cycle of the butterfly. What happens there is you're kind of muddying your goal, because you're also then requiring art skills, requiring, all these other pieces about, visual representation that might be a barrier for some of the students in the class. And it kind of muddies that goal of just knowing the life cycle of a butterfly. So UDL would talk about separating the means, that poster that we've been all assigned, that, I, as that second grade teacher, have been assigning to my students for 15 years, teaching about the life cycle of the butterfly, because I love the way those posters look and they're so wonderful. It's such a great project. It really then kind of muddies what my goal is for my students. Do I want to assess them on poster making skills? And if I do, that's totally fine. If that's the goal, then maybe let them pick the topic that they make a poster about, right? Or do I really care that they know the life cycle of the butterfly? And if I do, why does it have to be a poster that they're making? Could they act it out? Could they tell me about it verbally? Could they record a video? Could they do an interpretive dance? There's all these other ways that I can get to, did my students meet my goal? So I think we tend to attach a means to a particular goal, and that can be a barrier in itself for our students. And so I think it's really hard. I mean, for me, and I've been learning a lot more about UDL since I've been out of the classroom, but I'm thinking back to all these projects I did where there was this kind of very prescribed project that I assigned to go with a particular part of the content. I think it's just natural that we do that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about goals, and then talk together about a handful of examples, and then have you think of an example kind of your own. But according to goals, I mean, according to UDL, goals should really be learner-centered. They should be free of the means, right? They should not have that project attached if possible. They should be really intentional in the use of tools. So the tools are really meant to support the goal, not the other way around. Like, I know, and there's so many ed tech tools and different types of tools. And so really stopping to think, does this use of this tool really help support the goal that I'm starting with? And then also really being clear again on skill versus content, right? Because I think there we get muddied as well. Is it the essay writing, or is it the gold rush, right? And so if I'm having my students write the essay on the gold rush, do I really care that they got what I wanted them to about life during that time period and the impact on people, Native people that were here, and whatever that goal is that I want my students to learn about the gold rush, versus the essay writing skill or the main idea or whatever, that content versus skill. So that's really important as well to think about. And a couple of questions to consider, and I'll drop these slides in the chat for you before we leave today, so you can kind of keep these and keep them in mind. How can learners achieve this goal, right? I always thought it was so strange that, like grading on a curve or something like this, like, isn't our goal that everybody in our class gets an A because we want them all to learn, right? And master whatever that content is that we want them to learn. And so how can we help them achieve the goal? That's the whole point. How can tools or tech provide options to reach the goal? And then also what barriers might be in the way of reaching the goal, right? And so thinking about not only our students, but just globally, right? If any student walked in my classroom and this continues to be a goal, what barriers might any student face in terms of meeting this goal? So, so those are some things to think about. I think I'll pause there before we get to this next section. This is just kind of a reminder: clear goals, skills versus content, and removing that, making sure that the means is flexible so that we're really allowing them to show mastery of the goal, not muddying it with some other thing that might be preventing them from showing us that they mastered it. Anything about that? Questions or thoughts about any of that before we kind of jump into this next little section?
I wasn't at your other workshops, unfortunately. So what if you're looking at, I mean, I haven't really even thought through my question, sorry, but like, what if you want to have multi-tiered goals? I know we're avoiding that, but I want them to do this and this and this through this method. With choice. I mean, like with our current project, one was here, we're going to learn, we're doing self-portraits, we're going to apply value, we're going to work on proportions. And now you're going to do another portrait and you're going to choose the materials that you use. It's open-ended. You're going to choose the expression, do something different, or you're going to choose the, all these other options. And then it's kind of multi-layered because I want to see if they can, does that make sense at all?
Totally makes sense. Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And it sounds to me, just in your brief description, like you're kind of chunking this and you're teaching various elements within one project. And so, I mean, I think as long as you are, really looking at those goals individually, and not overlapping your assessment, right? So like if you can really pull out and assess mastery of the different elements, and then in the end say, give them that choice and say, okay, you've mastered this, and this, right, in our practice up until now, and I want to see if you can do a piece that incorporates all those elements, right, that you've already mastered individually. I think that's, yeah, it sounds cool. Awesome. Okay, well, I'm gonna
And
share.
can I
Oh,
ask
yeah.
something? So I don't mean to be like I'm just thinking, I've thought about this some because I took the UDL. When the teaching becomes so learner centered, how many options are we supposed to give the learner to demonstrate their understanding?
Right.
I'm just it just kind of,
It can get
from the
totally
teacher's
overwhelming.
perspective,
Oh.
yeah, yeah.
No, it can get totally overwhelming. And I think for students too, it can get too overwhelming if you give too many choices, right?
Yeah.
I think the whole idea is to eliminate the barriers. So if if you're really thinking about which of my students are going to run up against a barrier here and what type of option could I incorporate to eliminate for that student or for those couple students, then 2 options could be fine. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think we always have to be like, do whatever you want to teach me about the life cycle of butterfly. But if you know that there are certain students who really struggle with fine motor skills, then then only assigning that poster is going to be really hard for those students.
Of course.
So then you could say, okay, poster is going to be great for 80% of my students, but 20% might also really do great with saying it audibly or recording it on Flipgrid or, and come up with that one other option. So you have to keep it manageable for yourself as well, but again, I think the main idea is to really eliminate the barrier. So knowing what those barriers are for your current students, and then making sure there's at least one option that would remove that particular barrier for them.
But this is not suggesting like just a free for all.
Not at all. This is
Okay,
not suggesting a free for all at all.
And then also, even with the removal of the barriers, so to speak, if you want to interpretively dance the life cycle to me, so to speak, and you still don't demonstrate understanding, then
right.
They just don't understand at that
point. Right. Yeah. And you, again, I was being a little bit silly with like,
I know, but I'm just so am I. But I'm just saying, there's only so many. Yeah.
Totally. And you want to make sure you're choosing options that for you will really allow them to demonstrate what you want them to be able to show you. Right. Interpretive dance is going to be probably be a little loose.
Probably not the one I'd offer.
And probably, right. And I really think it depends on comfort level as well. Maybe this first year, you're so used to just assigning that poster and you're like, all right, I'm going to let it go a little bit. I'm going to add one more option in and try it out for a year and see how that goes. And then if you still see that those, if those 2 worked out okay, and then you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad to let them choose this or this, maybe I'll add a 3rd option in next year or something like that.
No, honestly, I already do that. It's not that. It's just that I'm just saying, like, you could take this.
Definitely not a free for all. No, I don't think, unless that works for you, right? Some teachers are like, sure, they can do, and could manage that. I don't think I could, manage that at all.
But I also think that it could, if you in the way it's presented, you could also end up not demonstrating any understanding.
Right. And you could also be creating another barrier of overwhelm for some of your students, right? They want parameters. And so I think it's important for their own like mental health and safety in your classroom to have some parameters and expectations.
We all need that.
Yeah, totally. No, it's a really good point.
Okay. Thanks. Just wondering. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so this next chunk, I was going to, and I'm going to switch to this. I'm going to try out this. There's this new, I haven't used it much, but it's an extension called Full Screen Interactive. And I like it because it allows you to actually be presenting, but also write on your slides. So this is called interactive. It's an extension called, I think, full screen interactive Google Slides. And so I get the big screen and I don't have the side, like slides on the side, but I can still click in here and type, which is kind of nice to be able to, like with your students, be able to add to your slides as you're presenting. So just, I have about 5 examples like this, and we don't have to take the time to go through all of them, but, and Beth, these are from our CAST training. So this might look familiar. You probably remember when we did this, but it's just a little, kind of like practice of thinking about, a lesson and maybe kind of breaking it down. So for this first example, if you were asking your students to read chapter 7 and complete vocabulary check and comprehension questions, we would really want to clarify the goal there. What actually is our goal? What's the goal of that, do you think? Any ideas of how we can kind of clarify for that type of lesson what our goal is for our students?
So that would be a content goal.
Yeah. Right. So we want them probably to understand whatever content was in that chapter. Right. So, I mean, it really depends what the chapter was about, but, and understanding the vocabulary words, right, attached to that content of that chapter. Right. So you can probably imagine what some barriers might be for some students, right? Can you think of a student that might struggle with sitting
Reading
down with
levels.
the book, reading level?
And ELD.
Focus and concentration.
Right. So all of those things are going to be barriers for probably a handful of students to sit down and do this on their own. So can you think of any design options? What might you incorporate? An option or 2 that would help eliminate some of this? For learning, remember again, our goal is to show that they know the content from the chapter. So any ideas of some design option that you could add in to make this more accessible?
Make a cartoon about the vocabulary or somehow.
Or you can have them read with partners.
Or or
Sometimes you can.
they could listen to it or watch a video of it or present it as a video.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can adjust the reading level too. So it's like, it's the same content, but it's an easier or harder passage.
Yeah. Yeah, you could adjust reading level. Right, so we get the idea here. We're not testing them on these structures of the questions that there are at the end of the chapter or like being able to complete a vocabulary check. Like that's not the goal. The goal here is really for the content itself, right? And we'll just look at maybe one more, this one or a couple more. This one, students will understand word problems about odd and even numbers. So I could see kind of 2 different goals here, right? Like I see kind of 2 different things embedded in the way that this lesson is written. Can you think of one or the other?
Well, I think you have to understand how to decipher word problems.
Yeah.
And then you have to know
Computation.
between odd and even numbers.
Yeah. So is our goal number 1 could be just how to decipher a word problem, how to look at that vocabulary. And I think a lot of us that have taught math have really done a lot of work around that. Like, what vocabulary are you looking for in a word problem that tells you what's being asked of you? How do you break down a word problem to know that you're answering all the parts of it, right? I've done a lot of explicit teaching around just understanding a word problem. Like this part right here, understand word problems. That could be the goal right there. The fact that they're about odd and even numbers seems like almost a separate goal to me, right? Do we want students to understand the difference between even and odd? So we would have to clarify, like, which are we trying to do here? And kind of, and that's not to say we couldn't do some teaching around understanding a word problem through a problem about odd and even numbers. But when we're looking for mastery or looking to assess our students on, did they get the point of this lesson, we'd have to separate out the two, right? A little bit to really assess them on that. So you guys get it, right? Like, what kind of barriers? Reading level again. Anything else? Not knowing what, not knowing the vocabulary,
Right.
not having been introduced to maybe the vocabulary of odd and even kinds of things. And then design options. What if we were, let's say we were focusing, let's say comprehension of word problems is really our goal. Some ideas of things that you could do to support that.
Sometimes if you have a strategy for the word problem in terms of like figuring out like certain things like what's the problem or how much. So I guess, yeah, specific strategies. And
Yeah.
even using like some kind of diagram to figure out how to solve the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Manipulatives.
Break
Right.
it. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Break it down into parts with keywords, like when it asks this is, and then kind of define, and then just try to reinforce that, because it probably won't be absorbed the first few times, but
Totally.
Mhm.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So you guys kind of get the idea, and I'll drop these in the chat. So if you want to look through these and even make a copy and fill these in yourselves or on a scratch piece of paper or something. My third one was thinking about students are going to work in collaborative teams of 4 to create a map of the classroom out of dried spaghetti. And like, to me, this one is like, oh my gosh, what is the goal here, right? Like, who knows what the goal is? Is it geography and like the directions, like east, north, south, east, west of your classroom? Is it manipulating small materials? Is it understanding spatial relationships? Is it collaborative work, working in a team? And, so who knows, like, but it sounds like a super fun project. But again, like, to really figure out clarifying what your goal is. And if your goal is collaborative teams, that's great, then have some really explicit things you're looking for in how they work to solve this problem together. If it's to really represent visually what is next to what and how things are related to each other, does it have to be dried spaghetti, right? Does it have to be, that kind of a thing? Because that could potentially, maybe for someone with fine motor skills, be very challenging and very difficult to work with, material to work with. So that's kind of the idea of what we're looking at, is really starting to think about, when you're designing a lesson, what's your goal? And really being clear on that, so that you're not muddying it with other pieces. And that's not to say you couldn't assign this project. Like, I actually think this sounds super fun and interesting to see what kids would come up with. It's just being really clear on what you would then assess. Like, I would never assess my students on how accurate the map was with the dried spaghetti, right, in the end. So just thinking about that. Here's another example of students will develop circle graphs of their classmates' favorite season. So is this a lesson on data collection? Is it a lesson on circle graphs themselves? Does it have to be a circle graph? Maybe it does, like you're in that part of the unit where it's a circle graph. But then does it have to be favorite season? Could they think of the question? How would they collect that data? How would they show it? All those kinds of things are things to think about if there's a particular barrier for students here. And then, just taking a minute. I thought maybe we could kind of take a minute, like just have spend 2 minutes where you kind of think of a lesson, either something you're doing right now or something that kind of pops into your head, where, maybe you're thinking about whether the goal is actually really clear, and what barriers might be there for your students. But it's also like 20 to 5. So we don't need to do that together. We can, but just, it's a good exercise to do for yourselves. So I'll again give you this format and you're welcome to kind of jot in it. I'm going to escape out of here and just go back to here. And I wanted to just really quickly go over, I thought these were really great. There's this PDF from CAST on developing learning goals. And I just kind of wanted to quickly, the link is right here. If you click on this, it's a PDF. And I just thought they were really great reminders, starting with a clear goal, sharing the goal in multiple ways. So being really explicit with your students about what the goal is, like they should know what they're trying to master, right? And I'm not sure I know for a fact that I have not been really clear about that in the past, like that I was not really explicit with my students about what the goal was of the lesson we were doing. And I think it's really important that they have an understanding of what it is, the purpose of that learning experience is, so that they know where they're headed and what the goal is for them. Framing goals with expert learning in mind. UDL and CAST are really big on the fact that our job is to create expert learners, students who understand what tools they need to be successful, and so that they can leave your classroom and go into another classroom and know, oh, I do really well when I use a screen reader, when I make a list for myself, when I chunk an assignment into smaller bits, so that they are building that knowledge of themselves, and then they're developing that, expertise and habits of mind of themselves as a learner, so they can carry that with them. So keep that in mind. Separating the goal from the means. We've talked a lot about how can I offer some flexibility, again, not a free for all, but at least some flexibility for students to choose how they're going to show me they've achieved the goal. Combining assessment with the goal in mind. So again, like, what are we assessing? It's okay to use that spaghetti, but are we going to assess, that the spaghetti's broken? Or if the map looks pretty accurate and we were trying to assess them knowing above, below, next to those types of words, that's what we're assessing, not their manipulation of spaghetti, right? And so just connecting the assessment to the actual goal. Including opportunities for personal connections to the goal. As I've been doing this collaborative work with some teachers one-on-one, this is one that's been coming up a lot. I've been working with teachers on how to let students kind of have some ownership of the goals, like helping set their own goals and being a part of the discussion around, what do I want my goal to be? And sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes you're like, no, you need to learn the life cycle of a butterfly, and that's what this unit is about. But how can students kind of really engage with that and take some ownership of the goals that they're trying to meet? And there's some interesting ways to be able to do that. And then dividing, and Margaret, I think that this kind of relates to what you were asking about, dividing large goals into sub goals and objectives. And it sounds like that is something you were working on to do with your students. Consider the process as well as the end product. I think a lot of times we focus a lot on an end product. And so backing up and thinking more about the process when possible, and if possible, providing models and examples, making time for reflection. And then there's some cool resources linked here. So you'll have all that if you want to look at any of that further. I just really liked this doc as a good reminder. And then last but not least, before we stop, I just like to link to some of the other resources around UDL. This is a kind of a doc I made of just some different things to explore. The CAS website has some great stuff on it. I've been putting things in a shared resource folder, so different like docs that can help you think through a lesson plan with a UDL lens, things like that are in that folder. There's lots of workshop opportunities. This organization, Novak Education, does a lot around UDL, and then a YouTube video collection. So lots there for you to kind of look at if you're interested in diving in a little bit more. And I'm going to just grab my slides and I'm going to make it, I think it's, let me double check that you can access them. And then if you want to write on them or anything, if you wanted to use it as like kind of your own worksheet, just make a copy. Feel free to make a file and make a copy. As of right now, you will have viewing access. But if you want to write on them, you can make your own copy. So there is a link to the slides. So any comments, questions, thoughts that came up, or otherwise we're get out of here a little early.
No, I like the very straightforward little diagrams that you have there. So you think it really through, do this first, this, and then that. And so that's very helpful in my brain.
Yeah. 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 And again, I think one of the biggest things about UDL, even though I don't think it's a brand new thing, I think a lot of us are doing a lot of these things already. It's not like we're not doing this. I do just think for me, when I reflect on, you know, what like my own teaching practices and where I was really successful with maybe incorporating some UDL and where I wasn't, I do really think there are times in the year when I was just really locked into a certain way of students like showing that they knew something. And I think there was a lot of room for me to shift my thinking around that, even if it was just to offer an either or kind of choice for them. I think probably would have made a really big difference for a handful of my students, you know. So
Just final question. Sorry, so many.
yeah, no,
Still doing one-on-ones with teachers at all
totally.
levels? Okay.
Yeah.
On different subjects, whatever we need training with. Okay.
Yeah, you know, I mean, mostly I've been doing like UDL collaboration. So if you are, you know, kind of seeing that there's something either in your own practice for yourself or for your students where you're like, I would love to kind of get over this little hurdle, and working through that together. But I'm totally open to, yeah, anything. Just send me an email about what you're thinking about and we can talk it through. Yeah. So I'm going to stop recording.